We're going to be live, and it's going to be... I don't know what's going to happen. Anything can happen. We're live right now, but we're not live because this is just you and me.
All right.
Can you hold the ambiguity?
Yeah, my brain's depressed and has no problem with ambiguity at the moment.
Oh, good. You know, it's always weird when I'm doing OBS because I'm streaming on two screens at once because I have split screens. So I have to cover one of the cameras, which are the screens, where I can see us both. Because otherwise I can see both of us on mirrored screens and it kind of wakes me out, freaks me out. Did that make sense? Sorry, that was kind of all over the place. Tried to explain it. Did it?
So, what do you want to start with?
I don't have any particular things in mind. Let's just pick up where we were on the phone for a good 30 minutes or so. So let's just pick up where we left off. So essentially, what I'm thinking after my latest school session is I want to attempt to articulate a tangible bridge between the cellular level of existence and the metaphysical. And the reason I want to do it in a way that is intellectually honest, because I think people drop the ball here sometimes with new age thinking and get into territory where they use the facts of science in a way that actually misrepresents them and ends up being a attempt to fit their narrative. So if, let's say, I'll give you an example. Let's say that you're a spiritual teacher, right? And you want to teach that the universe is limitless and that you're limitless and that you can transform anything. You can become anything you want by virtue of your ability to use your mind and manifest and the power of attraction. And then you see, on one hand, you're thinking science, we don't need science because science doesn't understand us, right? That's the common thing. But on the other hand, you're thinking, but science says these things that we can use to corroborate our claims so that we can continue to push our narrative of spiritual abundance. And I just find the whole thing to be absurd, because if you actually look at the data that's being cited, in many cases, I can't speak in too large of a generalization, but in many cases, if you look at the scientific data that's being cited, you can see that somewhere along the way, it's been taken to fit a narrative. So it's information that gets bent around a narrative, and then that means it's compromised its own integrity. So essentially what I'd like to do, because I am interested in the metaphysical, not in a woo-woo sense, in the sense that I believe the universe is incredibly mysterious, and I do believe in synchronicity, and I do believe that there are levels of listening and conversation and deep connection that we can't seem to describe with our dominant faculties of rationality. And my friend Dennis, who's also in the same grad program as I am, has articulated this quite well. And so we could look at even like Ian McGilchrist's work, the left brain and the right brain. We live in a society where the dominant way of understanding life is through the logical premises of what McGilchrist is saying is the left brain function. And then there's this more non-linear sensibility that speaks in metaphors, images, feelings. Mythopoetic imagination is one way to put it. That seems to have a way to encapsulate a larger framework of reality, and that can endure paradox. It has this sense of it's paradoxical. That's why if you go to any of the great spiritual works, you'll see in there there's just a litany of paradoxes. Like the Tao that can be spoken is not the Tao. There's all these things throughout all the religious traditions that contradict itself. The Virgin Mother has a son, births a son. Like that's a paradox. That's a deeply contradictory piece of wisdom that's coming out of a tradition. And so there's this way of feeling, sensing, and thinking that is inherently paradoxical and metaphorical, but also imagistic. And I think there's some gateway in that sensibility that brings us into the terms Carl Jung coined called synchronicity, where there's a sense of a meaningful coincidence or a sense of divine timing, impeccable grace, or cosmic humor, even things that take a wrong turn can kind of have that eerie feeling to it, as if there's some deeper pattern of being underlying the fabric of reality. Are you with me so far?
Yep, I'm following you.
So I want to figure out a way, because I want to maintain the integrity of a physical worldview that honors the fact that each individual is comprised of a unique brain that has been wired by their genetics, which makes them innately both capable of many things and restricted in their capacity because of that particularity that is wired. So that's pretty obvious. There are certain things that you have aptitude for, and there are certain things that seem less tangible or less natural to any given human being. And you can see this start to emerge in little children as young as, I don't know, when was the first time you noticed that your kids were different? 3?
Notice it
right away?
I was going to say, you notice it in a couple weeks even. Like, there's newborns that are colicky, and there's newborns that the mother's just says you'd be amazed, just sleeps right through the night. I noticed differences right from the beginning.
Yeah. So I want to... Go ahead.
There seem to be like proclivities built in.
That's right.
Some children will more naturally fall into a kind of gameplay involving like scorekeeping and moves, and their play is very oriented towards that, similar to a video game. And then there's children that fall more into the imaginative, where you can just pick up 2 rocks and like, hey, the bigger one's the daddy rock and this is the little girl rock, and just start weaving a story around that. But yeah, I definitely, and I don't know if it's like, I would agree with you. There's the scientifically established biological aspect of it, but that doesn't remove the mystery of that nature to me. First of all, we don't fully understand the biological aspect, but beyond that, there could be a soul coming in with some sort of, whether it's past life experience built into it, or even a fresh soul perhaps is coming in with some sort of spiritual aspect. And even like when you look at a pregnant mother, because we can see the way the bodies are connected, you can see how the mother's milk affects the child and all that biological stuff. But the child also isn't just that physical body. The child is also the electromagnetic sphere, which is just as scientifically there, but because we don't perceive it, we completely ignore it. So a child could be born with a level of programming in that magnetic sphere of their body that could be influenced by the electromagnetic spheres of other things around. And yeah, we don't know we don't know what consciousness is. And so we could also be coming in with proclivities from elsewhere. In fact, maybe something more spiritual or metaphysical even just is involved with the biological. We don't know why the genes combine from the male and female the way they do, and why some children have this or that. So if it turned out, and again, like, I have no idea what's going on. I'm not pretending to, and I'm not looking for individual proof one way or another, but just I have the thought that, for instance, if it turns out that reincarnation's real, then perhaps more advanced science would understand it. Would say, see how a soul coming in with this karma causes the DNA to enact in this way, and old ideas of people, like in the East, that you can manifest with some physical ailment from a past life. Like, who knows if anything like that could be true. And what you said early on about the way people will pick and choose scientific data to go with what they want to believe in the spiritual sense, we just do that with everything. And I find the best thing is just to recognize that you naturally do it, and then observe it in yourself. Because even like what you said about how at one moment they'll accept the knowledge from that source, but at another they won't. It's the same in like the conspiracy area. You can have someone who's like, oh, you can't believe the government, you can't believe not NASA. And so everything they disagree with, they write off that way. But if NASA says one thing that they agree with, they'll be trumpeting, see, they're finally telling the truth. So we do that in every single way, and I don't feel I've stopped doing that. So I observe when an idea seems true to me, I ask myself why. And I'll usually be able to observe, okay, it reinforces this, it feels good because of this. And so I try to counterbalance. Mm. If something fits my belief, I try to be more skeptical and keep that in mind. And if something seems like ridiculous to me, I try to look for what emotional root there could be for me rejecting the truth. Because intellectuals, like, we often like to say, look, we all know we're wrong about some things and right about others. But often we walk around feeling like we know what we're right about. If we're being really honest about that statement, that we must be wrong about some things, we also have to assume that some of those are the things we think we're right about.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And that segues into Jonathan Haidt's research, which we've discussed on this channel, about post hoc rationalizations and human intuition, and how the great research he did really shows that, in groups around him have done, really shows that we really believe what we believe on a deep intuitive sense. Not meaning right. See, the spiritual definition of intuitive means right, but the way Haidt is talking about it just means deeply felt. We have these deep inclinations politically. We have these deep inclinations personality-wise towards other people that we like or dislike, ideas that we like or dislike. And then what we do is create post hoc rationalizations to justify what we already want to be true. And I think that is perhaps one of the greatest problems of being any sort of scientist or philosopher or critical thinker, is because you're always going to come up against that problem, that no matter how hard you try, you're still being guided by forces that are beyond your rational capacity. And so to keep it honest, Haidt argues that the best way is dialogue in between people. Especially, let's say you're a scientist, you do a research project. You come out with a certain result. Well, another scientist is going to say, I want to find out if I can replicate that. And if that happens across enough dimensions, then what you have is something that can stand the test of time and bias, and seems to emerge as a truth that is beyond those limitations. So I think that that's one of the important things to, even like if you're not a scientist, even just having dialogue in between, talking to people you don't agree with, for me has been especially useful. Having difficult conversations with people and just seeing why they think what they think, and looking for the holes in my own perspective, and being open-minded to changing if necessary. And Dr. Peterson talks about, bless his soul for everything he's been going through. He talks about how it's painful to find out that you're wrong about something, even on an intellectual level, and it's actually painful to learn something new, because in order to learn something new, you have to be a fool, and being a fool has a certain element of unknown and pain in it. And so that, I think that the courage to be a fool is kind of a prerequisite for the result of eventual wisdom. But anyways, I want to circle back to what we were discussing earlier, which is, you mentioned that we don't know what makes these newborns. We don't know all the factors. We know part of it, which is that make the newborns unique and have the personality of their own. That's not like anybody else. There's no two people exactly the same. We do know that, we at least know that there is enough genetic and brain physiological evidence that has emerged that can say for certain that things are different. Things vary from individual to individual. We also know that we're 99% the same. We share 99% of the same genes on a physical level. That doesn't mean that what you said about souls or other factors wouldn't add more complexity to that process. I've just had too many experiences in my life that have convinced me that that we're not living in a totally random universe. That's been my experience. And it's anecdotal, so it's not a scientific, or it's not a purely provable thing on a wide scale. But I know for me, to be convinced of something on a deep level through experience, like having a synchronicity happen where it's just like, oh my God, the timing of this event, when that person called, or the thing that was said right in that moment. Like, I'll give you an example. The other day, I was helping somebody with a whose name shall remain unknown, and I'll disguise the identity as much as I can. So she was having trouble with her mom, and hadn't really talked to her mom in a long time. And, I was kind of counseling with her about this issue and how she didn't really feel comfortable about the situation with her mom. And her mom calls while we're having this conversation. And it was just this moment of, oh my God. And she was like, my mom never calls me. So I've just had too many experiences just like that. And more convincing than that. That suggests to me that there's something going on that is more than meets the eye. However, I don't tend to jump to conclusions about what that is. Some people will latch on to reincarnation. Some people will latch on to, spiritual transcendence and try to map out the energetic dynamics of the soul and how it all works. What I know, and this is why I really like Carl Jung, because he was an empiricist in the sense that he talked about what he could experience. So I know I can experience a sense of soul, like a deep connection within myself. I can feel like an orb of light when I access that point of my being because of various meditations. I know that I can access these states of being and I know that I have access to this synchronicity that kind of comes on its own terms. It's not like I control it. It's more like it kind of comes at its own will. You know, it kind of comes at its own.
Do you find the synchronicity comes in such a way that if you didn't want to believe in it, you could easily dismiss it? And do you find that when you pay attention to synchronicity, it seems to respond to your reaction to it? Do you find any of that at all in your experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think we have to be honest about the phenomena, because those moments are so charged with various emotions, and sometimes you'll get the chills, right? Or you'll have this deep sense of meaning and connection in that moment. And that very well could be the intuitive bias that Jonathan Haidt's talking about, that leads you to then create a story around why it must be so divine or it must be so impeccable. However, I just still found that for me, there's beyond a shadow. I could tell, this is kind of a throwaway line, right? Because it's like, then do it. But I could tell stories that would just blow people's minds, as far as just the weird timing of these things. And sure, you could still make an argument that every once in a while timing is just deeply coincidental. And that would be an interesting argument to make. And again, like, I want to be really... The reason... What I'm trying to share with you, though, Merc, is that I'm not a huge fan of the way that some of the spiritual narratives get spun into this... I'm trying to be kind. You know, I was going to call it gobbledygook, but I'm trying to be kind on totally unfalsifiable claims that there's just no way of knowing that at all. There's no way of proving it out. And so I like to kind of remain circumspect and keep myself with one foot in the physical world and one foot in the mysterious world. We'll just call it the world that we don't necessarily know how to explain. And yeah, physicists are now, making some attempts at looking at interesting aspects of our reality. But even they, like Sean Carroll, went on Joe Rogan and he was like, this multiple worlds thing isn't to be confused with some anything's possible spiritual doctrine. He made that, like, it seems to me that even the physicists who are really down in the dirt doing the research and the work still maintain a humility and a soberness about them that makes sure that it doesn't get interpreted as some grandiose spiritual narrative. But just to finish my point here, this long-winded point I'm trying to make, I feel like it's important, though, to, as somebody who has experienced this deeper dimension to reality, we could call it, and also as someone who is striving for intellectual growth and educational mastery in psychology, to attempt to bridge that physical metaphysical gap to some extent.
Is what you're finding that you dislike in people who start picking and choosing things from the science and misinterpreting it, is it just that they're trying to be certain about things that you don't feel we can be certain about? Like, for instance, if I were to say, okay, I think there's something bigger going on here, I could be wrong about that, but it seems to me that consciousness is not just a byproduct of the physical world. I think there's something to that. There's something to synchronicity. I think God means something. If I just stop there, I think I'm on solid ground.
Yeah, that doesn't bother me at all. That's like high five territory.
But most people don't like that at all.
That doesn't bother me. Yeah, well,
So,
most people.
but like most people would respond to that with, but here's what I believe the world is, whether they're a Christian or some believer or an atheist. And then they want you to describe, okay, if it's not my truth, you tell me what the truth is. And the problem is the most honest thing to say is the truth is beyond me.
I think that's what I wish more people would admit. And if somebody says that they have access to some further dimension, then the burden of proof is on them to actually prove, like, to show that, rather than to just say it as a statement that just gets discarded willy-nilly, and then you just go on and continue to, like, you just continue to say stuff like that. I think I don't want to mention names, but there's a lot of writers and stuff out there that pull these things, and there's other things that bother me about it too. But I'll let you finish first.
So, like, for instance, I interact with angels, and I'm honest with myself that I don't know what that is. Like, I don't know for a fact we live after death, and I don't know for a fact, actually not just angels, like I have all kinds of really bizarre religious experiences phenomenologically. And yeah, I just straight up don't know what that is. And if I examine it, I have sub-personalities that believe it's real and sub-personalities that believe it isn't. I find one thing that helped me notice the confirmation bias thing on my own, because I really noticed that in myself in isolation, was with bipolar. If you pay attention, you don't think about things the same way when you're depressed and when you're manic. And I think a lot of people have a tendency, we don't like to be a multitude. So I've noticed in other people and in myself previous to doing work on it that when I'm up, I want to discredit the depressed parts of me. I want to pretend those aren't there. And so the way I see things when I'm up, I want to act like I always see them. And if someone were to bring up what I said when depressed, I'd want to discredit it. I didn't know what I was talking about. I was depressed. Yeah. We tend to want to shut it off, whereas I pay attention and hold on to it. And I look at something when I'm manic, and I observe how I interact with the idea. Then I look at it when I'm depressed, and then I let those sub-personalities interact with each other the same way that you said you seek to do in conversation with other people.
Absolutely, yeah. Martin Heidegger writes about that, the modes of attunement, that different moods. The mood you are in reveals a particular salience landscape, meaning a landscape of significance, what's valuable or what's invaluable to whatever mood you're in. So that's what discloses reality phenomenologically as you're experiencing it in the present moment, is a particular mood that has a way of revealing itself, revealing a landscape of significance. And that's what a subpersonality is, or that's what an archetype is. It's a position in this primordial sense of being. It's an a priori position that has its own perspective, its own force of being, its own agency, its own way of seeing, and actually quite literally will close off certain possibilities in order to distinguish its own possibilities. Because to Heidegger, every possibility that you live into is also a not living out of other possibilities. So you have to close yourself off in order to be what he calls thrown into a mode of existence. You just find yourself being there in that mode. It's called thrownness. Anyways, I digress. Where were you going with that?
I don't know where I was going, but a different thought popped into my head from something you said earlier. So it seems to me that, like, that idea of the Tao that can be named isn't the Tao. And I think, like, reality is just massively beyond human comprehension, I think, is part of the issue here. Is it's not just a matter of us figuring out what we're right and wrong about to figure out the nature of reality. I think the nature of reality is beyond our ability to comprehend here. and also all the paradoxical aspects of nature and paralogical, like Tim Freak brings up, aspects of nature, combined with the fact that there's too much there to understand. I get this feeling that's all intentional, and it's to allow us a multiplicity of experiences in the same dimension. And sometimes I think of it as an idea of like reality being made up not of 100%, like we usually think of something's 100%, like that's all of it. To me, reality is like a multitude of hundreds that are reality is so beyond us that you could find a variety of ways to view the world that you will 100% find there because it is there. And if you just limit your perception properly, you will experience it. Okay, I've got, with this limited perspective, a complete story that satisfies my ability to understand. And that may be part of the purpose here, so that you can, the same way that taking on different frameworks, taking on different axioms and understanding of reality filters our understanding of reality and even filters the way we perceive it. It's that I've stopped looking for the right way to understand them. It's like, that's what I used to think. It's like there's a right way that actually, and instead it seems more like there are a variety of options to interact with the world. And the point isn't to be right. You know you won't be right. But that you learn something from each kind of interaction you have with this universe. I also assume I don't know the goal of this game or test or school. I'm aware of that as well. I kind of, you know, like a lot of video games now, like in the olden days, it was you knew what you were supposed to do. Pac-Man goes around and does this, you get points. But newer games, like a story unfolds, where you start by just exploring. You don't know how to play the game, but you just assume the game's playable. And by exploring and looking at the game different ways, that, oh, I might be supposed to be doing this, maybe this, and that the different, just like trust this as a playable game, and that everything I'm doing, I'm learning.
Yeah, there's a real openness and going with the flow to what you're saying that allows things to be the way they are. You mentioned a word earlier, phenomenologically was the word. I think that's the key. That's the key to maintaining a sense of humility and devotion to your own experience. You have to go with your phenomenological experience. If you have a vision of Jesus Christ and you find yourself conversing with Christ, there's a certain point where it doesn't matter the objective truth to that experience, because it's an experience you're just having in that moment, right? It's something that's, or a near-death, it's something that's happening to you. And so I have no problem with that level of that. I think that is what it's all about, is like lean into your experience. I mean, obviously within the realm of safety for some of us who have certain, overwhelming imagistic impulses, for example, a schizophrenic diagnosis, you have to be more careful with this territory. But whatever your experience is, I think leaning into it and exploring it is the right thing to do, as far as if you're interested in personal development and growth and figuring out what your soul really is all about, and what turns you on and what bothers you and where there's room to grow, and all that stuff is really essential. What I have a problem with is if you took that vision of Christ, you wrote a book about it, and then you said, and here's why this metaphysicist says that this vision is real. It's like all of a sudden you're trying to make this thing objective, and you're trying to make it something of the highest order, of the high. It's more true than anything else, and so all other methodologies and ways of seeing have to bend themselves around my worldview now, because this is what I experience, or this is what I believe.
And the difference there, when you stop treating it phenomenologically and you start being certain, it becomes impossible to be honest anymore, even with yourself. And so that's the big advantage I find taking the phenomenological approach, is therefore I can just be honest. Because if you set up some set of rules to what you understand, then everything has to fit those rules. So anytime you're experiencing something beyond the understanding you wrote down, you're going to have to lie about it to others, yourself, or both. And it's letting go of the certainty, because if I had to explain whether or not my angel was a delusion or an angel and why that was true, I just couldn't be honest about the experience.
So let's go with that example a little more. So you talk to an angel that you experience. And
yes.
And when you're talking to this angel, it, for all intents and purposes, feels real.
Yes, phenomenologically, it's real.
So
now, I'm also aware that, like in Fight Club, it is possible psychologically to experience another entity that seems to be outside your own consciousness, and it's possible to hallucinate that. I'm also aware that, as far as I know, it's also theoretically possible for people to have religious visions. So I don't know what it is, but phenomenologically, the easiest to describe.
That's a great example. And would you say that this interaction that you have on a regular basis is something that is good for your soul? It's something that improves your sense of life. It imbues, it brings a certain level of meaning.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So see,
that right level of meaning, also, just as for a practical point of view, is why I've never committed suicide.
Exactly.
The metaphysical didn't seem real enough to me. So when some people say, like, put your money where your mouth is with a belief, the result of my beliefs and the result of treating my angel and my interactions with God is I treat them as though they're real, even though I'm aware that I don't know what real means.
That's
so again,
beautiful.
Whether the gods are inside or outside of us. I put my money where my mouth is I get extremely suicidal. And I don't kill myself because of this. I'm willing to, like, for some people, the big statement is I would die for my beliefs. No, for me, I'm willing to live for them. There's plenty of times where I'd rather die, and I'm willing to live the full life I have to live, whatever difficulties are ahead of me, because I believe this. And it does practically give me the strength to resist it. And for people who've never had it, I won't be able to explain this beyond, I think, in the never-ending story. The swamp of sadness where Atrax dies is the perfect metaphor. Suicidal thoughts, that energy, are absolutely dead. It is very difficult not to die. Like in the swamp, the characters get weighed down and sink until they can't hold on. Depression saps your physical energy, it saps your will to live, it saps your psychological defenses. And like you just want the fuck out. So it takes a lot for me at times to deal with that. And all of that comes from taking the metaphysical, all that God shit, seriously.
Yeah.
Or maybe not seriously, sincerely.
Sincerely, yeah.
While still being aware. And also it seems to me that early on you get this idea, oh, I'm tapping into something. It's real, and therefore all my prophecies are true. But it seems to me like you tap into something that seems real, but it's really easy for you to just project into that ideas that will come back at you, charged up with the energy of that dimension. And so you can project your shadow into the higher dimensions, it seems to me. So don't assume that just like, even if God's real and even if my angel is real, I don't assume I understand them correctly either. So you don't just walk off the top of a building because your angel says you should.
That's great that you explained all that. Carl Jung has a really interesting interview where someone asks him, "Do you believe in God?" The interviewer, and he says something, I'm not exactly these words, but something along the lines of, I don't have to believe. You know, belief is for people who don't know. I want to know God. And to me, that just captures the heart of an earnest soul that is seeking a direct experience rather than creating a fortress of beliefs to protect itself from the unknown, or to buttress itself against chaos, but to open yourself up and say, I'm open to anything being possible, and I want to experience it. I want it to enter me. I want it to be a part of my life rather than just an abstract thing. And that's the line that I like to try to toe. And I have similar experiences to you with certain images that have, you could call them, you call yours an angel, you could call them a guide or a totem or whatever you want, that to me feel like a direct connection to the creator, to something vast beyond my...
Seems to me that we're all projections of the creator, and that
whatever that means, whatever the creator means. Yeah, that's
like as if that's a light, and each one of us is a little crystal that filters and reduces the light into a specific color.
Yes.
And that it seems to me the angels and all the spirit guides and the various things are family in some way, that in certain ways there are brothers, and in other ways they're at different dimensions and levels of connection to whatever we're all shining out from.
Yes.
Although that's all metaphor for shit that must be completely located in that non-linguistic part of my brain, because I have all sorts of things inside this intellectual space that I have no words to describe. You'll start talking about feelings, or even to talk about mental images. Like, no, mental images are what come later from certain things going on that I just don't know how to explain.
Yeah, absolutely. So just going back to because I don't feel like I ever got to the crux of what I was originally trying to say. And the crux of what I was originally trying to say is the body, the physically apprehendable reality, which includes our human bodies, really matters. And it matters to the extent that we will all die someday. We can observe that to be true. If you stand in front of a bus, unless you're Mercury Black, there's a good chance you won't survive. Coming down. So there.
And I've also been hit by lightning. Those are the two people always use to say you might die tomorrow.
Yes. If you have the proclivity to experience strong anger, you're more likely to use anger as a coping style as a child. If you have the proclivity for alcoholism, if you drink, you're more likely to become an alcoholic. These things are real, and what bothers me is when people reintroduce the tabula rasa, the John Locke blank slate, which really does a disservice to the innateness of a human soul, of a human being, the uniqueness of a human being.
Also, it doesn't match with our experience.
Yeah, it's just...
I don't like... When you listen to that description of reality, when I look back on myself, I experienced myself as a small child the way I've experienced my younger siblings and my kids.
Yes.
I seem to just find I had a personality. And I don't know where that came from.
It's a priori. It just is there. It's already there with you as you're thrown into your being, as Heidegger would say, or the phenomenologists would say. You just find yourself there in a certain mode. And
the same way with like our physical body. Yes, we're mostly the same, but on the other hand, some people's eyes don't work when they're born. Some people's eyes don't see certain colors. Some people's eyes are totally colorblind.
Yes, those are all great illustrations. So this...
And how much negative emotion people experience. Like in my observation of people, it seems to me some people have a higher capacity, like the way different metals have a higher or lower capacity to allow current. Yeah. Some of us have a higher capacity to experience more negative emotion.
Well, and there's tons of research to support that. Tons of research. I mean, I think at this point, it's not going to be long before the mainstream society understands these things. There's still a lot of blank slate lingering, especially in certain areas of the university and mainstream culture. but here's the crux of the point that I'm trying to make, which is we've been circling around like a labyrinth for a while here.
We're spiraling in.
Yeah, we're spiraling into the core here. I believe in transformation. I believe in the body. I believe in the power of genetics. I believe in the soul. I believe in the power of a deep sense of light and life force within the being. I believe that we're capable of amazing things in our lives if we use that consciousness, if we drive our intention into it. And I believe we're all unique, and that there are certain capacities which need to remain distinct from unlimited. That being on the whole narrative of everyone's a blank slate, and if you would only just be different, then you would be like Tony Robbins. Or if you would only just be different, then you would be like Jordan Peterson. It's just that whole idea that it's just a matter of how you're focusing. That's untrue. James Hillman wrote a book
sometimes I think it's true. Like, some people might be, if they made the right choices, they have the capacity to do a certain thing. But I agree that it's not, the idea is that not everyone can.
But even more than that, you'll never actually be anybody else. You can only live into your own distinct potential, whether that is parallel or totally different than someone else's.
Yeah, and I guess like the idea is not that you can be anything, but you've got a wide range of things you could be. Yeah. And my point was just that some people might be, and no, you would never be Jordan Peterson.
Never.
But there's some people who might have a very similar art, or who might be able to play a similar archetype very well.
Absolutely.
Yet
I agree with that.
Other people, just no matter what they do, they're never going to step into that role. Same way that some people, it's weird, just fucking know how to play piano. Like little kids that can just do it. And then there's someone else who just, no matter how much they study, they'll never be a great pianist. And some people can't read. Their brain just, severe dyslexia. So we don't all have the ability to physically or mentally do the same things.
Exactly. Well, Beethoven, I think it was Beethoven wrote his first symphony at 4 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can't make this shit up. You can't make this.
What the fuck does that mean? Like, how did that happen?
Well, exactly. Well, James Hillman wrote this book called The Soul's Code, and within it, he has this whole idea of the acorn theory. And the acorn theory posits that we each come in with a seed, a potentiality that's planted in our life, and the callings that we experience as children, the sense of connection, the sense what lights us on fire, those are kind of early indicators of what we might, potentially grow into. But the idea is that the soul comes in with this beautiful, unique tapestry of being that has in it an image that it can grow into. It has an image of potential. So you actually come into the world with the seed of who you could be. And that's a beautiful thing, no matter who you are, no matter what no matter what your level of intelligence is, or certain skill sets that differ from other people's, or your proclivities, the things that you like or dislike, just the very notion that you have something unique to birth, to give rise to in the world. To me, that's an extremely positive message that is just as helpful as telling someone that, there are no limits, and it's only, it's a matter of your attitude, which isn't very, to me, that's not a very introspective thing to say. It's not true. It's not about focusing on limits. It's about focusing on distinct possibilities, getting really clear about who am I, and doing the soul searching that it takes to make that happen. But then to connect it back to the metaphysics piece, again, I've just had too many experiences when I'm in that soul connection that make me feel like there is some sort of invisible support network for,
Oh,
you know?
if we're just talking phenomenologically, it's like
Yes.
my life has gotten like fiction. It seems it's ridiculous, some of the magical experiences I've had. And also, I've had so many occasions of somebody else who's either very, very religious and like believes in interaction with angels, or other practitioners of magic who have known, who pick, like with me having no reason to assume that I would take seriously them talking to an angel or something, like get a feeling off me and ask that. I'm like, yeah, I do magic, or yeah, I have an angel. I've had all kinds of weird experiences, and all kinds of synchronicities, and other people from a variety of different mystic disciplines like recognize it in me in synchronistic ways without me telling them. It's like phenomenologically, it's real to me. I'm living it out as though it's real. And another thing with like to get comfortable with not knowing things in that way that things are understandable is what I often look at with various beliefs. Even it's like what I did with free will, because I can totally understand Sam Harris's point. And there seems to be some mystical requirement for free will at the same time. I'm not sure what to believe, but what I look at is, how does this framing affect my experience of the world? And I almost look at it like certain frames of mind are like magical spells that if you run that internal dialogue, your reality will be altered by it. And does interacting with my angel in this way make experience better or worse? Does being judgmental and dogmatic give me a more pleasant experience? Or does being brutally honest and forgiving, and to look at the outcome of it? Also, one thing Manly P. Hall said about when you get all these really convincing people of different disciplines, and you're trying to wonder, like, hey, is what they're telling me true? He said, what you should look at is not how clever they are to explain their theory, but look at whether or not when they learned the theory, they became better or worse. So he said, if they're talking about some religion, look at their life. And when they started doing that religion, did they become more honest? Did they become more charitable? Did they seem to have more inner peace? But if you look at them, they're just as much of a liar. You don't see any internal peace in them. Like he said, look at that to judge whether you should listen to someone, as opposed to we're very focused on the argument. And that's how I've interacted with things, and that's why I go with, I live my life the way I live my life, because also I have the added bonus of being so crazy that, like, if I don't take care of my internal shit, I just like fall apart. It's like I have to focus on things the way I do. I have to be incredibly mindful of how my thoughts affect the way reality manifests, because otherwise, if I don't do the right work to take care of myself mentally, I'll fall into total psychosis. And in one way, you can view that as a curse, or you can view that as a strange tool to discipline me on this path. You get what I mean? Like,
yes,
and nothing else would have made me do this kind of internal work.
Yes, and just look at how you're accepting the pieces of your reality that make you unique, and as a result of accepting that, you get to live into the best possibility, or one of the better possibilities available within that reality, rather than resisting that it exists and telling yourself it shouldn't be this way, and I shouldn't feel this way, or it's not okay to have these certain moods that I go through.
And I used to do that, but it's just, if I treat it that way, it's too brutal. Right. You get sick of getting locked in a mental institution against your will. And you get sick of the borderline moments where you're not that far from actually trying to kill yourself.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, for me, it is a matter of life and death to take myself serious, like to take my internal phenomenological world seriously. I just don't have a choice.
Yeah, I think that it is important, and I couldn't have said it better. I think you nailed it with all of that, man.
And so possibly Peterson will come out of his current problems pushed to some new pinnacle.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows what will happen with that? Yeah, I mean, it's
like I felt horrible hearing he was going through all that intense suicidal period, but on the other hand, part of me wonders, like, I wonder what gem he might discover in those depths. Like, he's a strong guy. He can go in and out. He's an amazing mind. Maybe as horrible as it is, it will serve him in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely sad what has transpired for him and his family over the last year, between the cancer of his wife to his own illness, and then now kind of being attacked by people for having shared these things. And he's probably not listening to those comments because he's probably not able to participate on the Twitter world at this point in his recovery. So I hope he's not really in the loop on that. But
although in the update, didn't Michaela say like recently he's finally smiling and getting back to his old self?
Yeah, but I hope he's not checking Twitter or you know what I mean. It would just be such a waste of energy to engage with the shitstorm that's going on there, and the piling on and the insults and all that after what he's gone through. I don't know what's going on with him exactly. I mean, I've heard rumors that there could be potential neurological damage, that he might not ever be the same. I've heard all sorts of different stuff. I have no idea what's true. What I do know is that it just saddened me. That's really I felt a sense of grief to hear that from Michaela, and I feel, yeah, I still feel it. It feels like a precious moment has passed that I hope I savored enough. The period of time where he was so active and shaking things up and creating dialogue in the world, helping young men and women and various ages, actually, from all over the world, encouraging us to think. He to me, Peterson is not someone who tells you what to think, but teaches you how to think. And I've come to the point since 2017 or whatever it was when I found him, to the point where I can actually disagree with him, some of the things he says, or have counterpoints, because of how good of a job he's done in increasing my ability to think. So then I can turn that back in on itself and say, okay, well, here are some areas with, this lecture that I have questions about, or these things. And that, to me, that's the mark of a really good teacher. They're so good that they bring you up to a level where you can even start to develop your own place in the world of psychology, philosophy, whatever field you're in. And I so much gratitude for that. It's so cool. I don't know if I would have applied to graduate school if it wasn't for the hope that he gave me that, there is something to be salvaged here in the academic world that is beyond identity politics. And although he wasn't necessarily encouraging people to participate in the universities, what he did encourage is the capacity for me to continue my education. And man, it was just such a precious time to have, his rise was the inception of this channel. You know what I mean? Like, it's so important what he represents, what he symbolizes to what we're doing here. And I just can't say enough about how much appreciation I have for the things that he's done and the people that he's helped and the impact he's made in my life. And I really wish him a speedy recovery, because it sucks to hear that he's suffering so much.
Yeah, and the impact he had on society was strong enough that, like, I don't mean as a result of his teachings, but like the result of his action in the world and how that stirred people up. If it wasn't for Peterson, none of us would know each other. I wouldn't know you or Grizz. I wouldn't know Andrew. And if it wasn't for Peterson, I wouldn't be on YouTube. It was like a series of synchronicities. And if it wasn't for Peterson, Andrew wouldn't have been doing YouTube and wouldn't have asked me to take over. Right. So yeah, the impact he's had on our lives, like even aside from his teaching, just the wake he left as he moved through society over the past few years stirred things up enough that it caused us all to drift into the same digital area. And yeah, this channel wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. We wouldn't know each other.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, and also, I apologize for the echo, everyone. I know that we're supposed to talk like no one's listening, but I did finally get a chance to check the comments here after we've been on for about an hour. I don't know why I'm getting an echo. I've been trying to figure this out. I switched the settings here today. I thought that would fix it. I've tinkered with it before. And for some reason, when I use this OBS software, which allows us to stream live on our video calls, I get this echo, and it's really bugging me because I feel like it takes away from the content a little bit. So I'll keep taking a stab at what the hell is going on. So I hope it's at least somewhat bearable to listen to, because I'm quite annoyed that it's continuing to happen. So sorry everybody if it's bugging you. I'll keep working on it and see what I can do.
Oh yeah, and it's getting pretty late. I got a call scheduled with Asa in under half an hour.
Yep, and I should go.
Is there anything in the comments we should respond to?
Let's see here. Hey, Longstone, Plague, Patty J, Grim, what's up, Grizz? Nolan, how you doing? Dust to Dust, thanks for tuning in. And is the microphone set to two-way? No, it's set to, unless my microphone's broken, it's set so it just takes the front. Let's see if maybe this will take it away. Tell me if that does anything. I just switched the setting to something else where it records the whole room. Longstone says OBS is picking up a second audio source. Can help you debug at some point. That would be awesome, Longstone. I would like to take you up on that. Anyways, everybody, am I still echoing? Just give me a quick feedback if I'm still echoing right now, just so I know, because Mercury wouldn't be able to tell since he's not listening to the stream. And then we're going to go ahead and end. Oh, it solved it. What the fuck? Okay, so I had to switch it from it wasn't on the double one, Dust to Dust, but when I switched it to the circle, which records the whole room instead of just in front of me, then I guess it fixes it. So I guess I'll use that from now on. Dust to Dust says yes. Longstone says yes. Fuck, I wish I did that at the beginning of the stream. So
focus it on it the other way. We could have gone on for weeks like that. Like, hooray, finally solved.
Yes.
Don't turn that negative.
Positive thinking.
There.
Yeah, awesome.
We accomplished something tonight.
Yeah, we accomplished something. So we figured it out. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you for allowing our meandering conversation to take place and witnessing it. So, all right, I'm going to end the stream.